So I'm going to be watching the Battle of Ankara, told by the great HistoryMarche. Now, I've seen this battle already from Kings and Generals Rise of the Ottoman Empire series. That video actually dropped today with this one at the same time, mainly because I kept getting comments that, oh, you have to watch the Battle of Ankara by HistoryMarche, and some people were even advising me to straight up skip Kings and Generals version. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna watch both. Because I saw the Kings and Generals version first, and if you want to see more of me being blind and not knowing what's going on, jump there. This is my more experienced self watching HistoryMarche's telling. And I have to say, this is such a cool battle. There's some things I probably should get off my mind first. Timur scares me. Like, the first time we were introduced to Timur in this channel was in the chat history video, Evil Kings and Evil Things that they did. And, you know, basically the story of him running over or trampling upon him and his army upon like 7,000 children or something like that. So, like, that was my introduction to Timur, and that video left an impression on me. You can probably watch my reaction to it. I was off-put, watching that. I also think I may have vomited after, mainly because I had eaten before I was recording, and I should never eat too. Well, point is, either way, it left an impression on me, and, you know, for the longest time, that's mainly all I knew about Timur, that act of cruelty, and his giant empire. And now he returned here in the Battle of Ankara, and I was caught off guard. And I was so, like, afraid of Timur. I was even afraid for Bayezid when he showed up. I was like, you can literally watch my reaction to the Kings and Generals version. I was, like, afraid for Bayezid. And Bayezid ain't, like, a pushover either. He's a famed commander himself, but, like, even then I was like, dude, maybe messing with Timur is not the best option right now. And I guess my concerns were proven right, considering that Timur pulls off the W at the end. And I just, like, mainly through, you know, using the deception and the betrayals and whatnot. But, yeah, overall, Timur scares me. And it's funny to think that he's kind of seen as the hero in this story, at least, you know, for the people who are anti-Ottoman, like the Romans, etc., and the other Turkish groups, which is the funniest thing, Timur being a hero or the good guy in a conflict. I know, and pushed away, you don't really judge these guys as good guy or bad guy. Though I would say Timur is probably the more frightening of the two, cause that dude will run over all your children. Like, Bayezid can be cruel too, but I would much rather deal with Bayezid than Timur. You know, personally, I would be scared of Timur, and I still am. So overall, yeah, we saw the Kings and Generals version, and I loved it. And now I'm going to watch the HistoryMarche version, which people keep saying is, well, some people have said it's the superior telling. I don't know, that has yet to be seen. I'll find out which one I like more, but, yeah, this is really a clash of titans. Basically, the two superpowers of Islam meeting together and, like, having an epic duel. Like, a meeting between equals, if it were. So, yeah. Let's get to it, shall we? Let's watch the Battle of Ankara by HistoryMarche. It's March, but you know.
This video is sponsored by Growth School.
Heck yeah.
By the late 14th century, Ottoman armies pushed the border of Islam into Europe. Disastrous defeats suffered by the Christians at Maritsa, Kosovo, and Nicopolis reverberated across the West. European rulers would not challenge the Ottomans for another 50 years. Sultan Bayezid, returning across the Bosphorus Strait, had continued the expansion into Anatolia. A formidable empire was forming, stretching from the Danube to the Euphrates. Meanwhile, another powerful empire emerged in the east. Timur had proclaimed himself heir to the Ilkhanids and their right to rule over Anatolia. Poised to re-establish the Mongol Empire, he marched west into Ottoman territory. The 20th of July 1402 would become an important point in the history of Anatolia and the Balkans. On that day, two of the greatest conquerors of their time met on the dusty plain outside Ankara. Compared to in the winter months of 13...
Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching the Mongol Empire series by Kings and Generals, because I know that's where Timur is, and his exploits are covered. So I'm actually really looking forward to seeing more about him and everything that... more about the guy, you know? Like I said, I have a weird, now morbid fascination with this man. He traumatized me. Timur has traumatized and scared me in a way no other historical figure has. So, he definitely... I'm looking forward to seeing more and hearing more of his exploits and how he became so successful in war-mongering and whatnot. Though I know he was lame. Like, apparently there... At least by the chat history version and other tellings, he had disability. But that didn't stop him. He was like, I'm still going to, like, kick everyone's butt. So, you know, that's kind of inspirational for, I guess, in that aspect, you know?
96, news of the defeat at Nicopolis spread across Europe.
The Battle of Nicopolis still makes me laugh. The frickin' French just kind of really screwed everyone over through their own arrogance and just charging in recklessly. Oh man, you can watch my my 100 Years War series that I did from Kings and Generals. It's just the French kept pulling that crap all the time, and it's like, after a while, I'm like, you guys are slow learners. You can't just keep recklessly charging in, Leroy Jenkins style, and hope that it just keeps working out, you know? That's the funniest thing.
Sultan Bayezid's troops captured the remnants of the Christian army and led them in chains on a trek to Gallipoli. King Sigismund of Hungary was among the few who managed to escape the carnage. Fearing the long march back home, he embarked on a journey down the Danube and sailed towards Constantinople, intending to reach Hungary by sea. His troops were less fortunate, lingering in captivity for 2 years. They were finally sold to a French delegation for a sum equal to 700 kilograms of gold.
Dang.
Meanwhile, the victorious Sultan Bayezid pacified the rebellious Vuk Brankovic of Serbia and destroyed the recalcitrant Tsardom of Vidin, sending its ruler to Basra, where he died in captivity. By now, the master of the Balkan Peninsula, and with the prestige of being the Sultan of Rum, Bayezid had proved more than equal to his forefathers. But these possessions were divided by the Sea of Marmara and the Dardanelles. This meant that a campaign on one side...
Again, the geography of, you know, this setting, from Anatolia to the Balkans, is such a unique place in world history, and I really like it. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of the Greeks. They're my favorite culture to study and learn about, and just the geography alone is so interesting. But again, like, there's a big disadvantage between ruling here to Anatolia. It's just you're surrounded, right? Like, east and west, if you have enemies, they can come. I mean, the Ottomans obviously proved to be able to handle it, but other empires, like even the Romans, eventually got, like, basically squeezed into that, you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, like, the disadvantage, like, you're on one side, you have an enemy on the other, they can, like, split you in half, because there are times in the Ottoman series where, like, you know, essentially, they were stuck on one side while the other side was being ransacked. Like, it's definitely, I think, a lot challenging ruling from this place in terms of geography, you know?
Usually resulted in rebellion on the other. Indeed, while Bayezid was preoccupied with the crusade of Nicopolis, the Bey of Karaman took Ankara by force in 1396. He captured the Ottoman governor of Anatolia a grave insult to the court in Adrianople. In 1397, with the European threat gone, Bayezid crossed into Anatolia once more. The Ottoman dynasty had long defined itself as Ghazis, meaning warriors of the faith, but they were often at war with their Muslim brethren for dominance in Anatolia. Bayezid's swift march reflected his moniker, the Thunderbolt. The Ottoman Sultan reduced the Karamid forces at Konya before capturing and executing Ali Bey. He continued the eastward push in 1398, using the instability in the region to capture Sivas and much of the Eretna Beylik. In doing so, Ottoman domination over Anatolia was established. A year later, in 1399, Bayezid exploited the death of the Mamluk Sultan Berkuk to cross the Taurus Mountains. Berkuk's son and heir, Ferek, was only 10 years old and unable to mount a defense. The conquest of the Malatya region was an important step, for it gave Bayezid access to the Euphrates, a vital logistical waterway. Moreover, with the Taurus Mountains behind him, the road into the plains of northern Syria was now open. Bayezid's aggressive policy in the east was a resounding success, but it brought him into conflict with another emerging superpower. Nearly 30 years before, in 1370, then a little-known Turco-Mongol Amur in Transoxania, Timur established his domain with Samarkand as the capital. He used the waning influence of the Chagatai Khanate, one of the successor states of Genghis Khan's great empire, to impose his rule on much of Central Asia. Timur spent the next 30 years on campaign. Much like the Mongols did a century before.
Holy crap, the man was built for war. Like, he's just like... Timur was born to be like a war... I keep saying warmonger, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I mean, it can... Usually when it's used, it's like a disrespectful thing, but like... I guess a man of war is a nicer way to put it. But, yeah, just like... 30 years... And I had read something about him kind of like being very mobile with his army and his like camp, which would make sense because like considering he's always moving about and fighting, you know, kind of like life on the road in a sense. I guess is the equivalent of living your life on the road, you know. And that's cool to hear about that kind of motive of restoring the Mongol Empire. Like, Timur's empire was huge, like, you know, I'm not sure about all the successors of the Mongol Empire. I'm not gonna pretend that I'm an expert in that, other than the Mongol Empire itself was huge, obviously, as we know, probably the biggest interconnected land empire to ever exist. But, I'm willing to wager, I guess in my ignorance, that Timur probably you know, considering his big empire, probably, you know, maybe captured a good amount of it, like, maybe not, well, obviously not all, but you know what I mean. I guess if anyone would come close enough, it'd be him. Unfortunately, I know Timur's empire didn't really last long after him. Yeah, like, went on decline after his death, so, yeah.
He took the medieval world by storm. In spectacular fashion, Timur expanded his empire into India, Persia, and the Middle East, winning countless battles and successfully besieging the most formidable of cities. His raiding expeditions took him across the Caucasus Mountains, beyond the banks of the Volga River, defeating the armies of the Mongol Golden Horde and sacking countless cities, reaching not far from Moscow itself, before turning back south, ravaging his way towards the rich coastal cities of the Crimean Peninsula. The final leg of the expedition took him east to the Ural River, before he returned to friendly territory. This was a trail of destruction 10,000 kilometers long, so effective that it permanently weakened the Golden Horde, ending their grip over Russia.
This man was a menace. Timur was a straight up menace, like I said. I only know the big famous act of cruelty where he trampled upon like thousands of children with his horse. Which just leaves a lasting impression of the kind of guy he was. I think you could tell that story and you kind of get, okay, you don't mess with Timur. You know what I mean? Like, look at how much land he's interconnected. And what I meant earlier was like, I guess I'd imagine that Timur's empire is probably one of the bigger successors of the original Mongol empire. I know there's the Golden Horde and there are other hordes, but you know, I think that's what I meant to say earlier. You know, I guess if anyone could even achieve at least even a modicum of like achieving a bit of what the Mongol Empire was, I guess Timur could have been, if only he had lived longer. But I think it's good he didn't. Oh, yeah, this dude, man, he even made it to sort of Europe and stuff. Like, he's like, let me go on tour and just ransack everything along the way, you know?
By the year 1400, Timur was an awe-inspiring war leader, known across Asia and Europe. His formidable army was composed of grizzled veterans who rode with him across 2 continents. Proclaiming himself heir to the Ilkhanids and the Seljuks, Timur claimed the right to rule over Anatolia. To this end, he sought alliances in the region. The heirs to the beyliks of Eretna and Karaman, recently conquered by Bayezid, accepted Timur's offer in the hope of receiving military aid to re-establish their rule. Other Turkic nobles from conquered beyliks in western Anatolia also flocked to Timur, fleeing Bayezid's attempts to exterminate local dynasties and establish central Ottoman authority in Anatolia.
Yeah, little did Bayezid know that his conquest of Anatolia would indirectly lead him to this conflict, which would be his undoing. I think he had the right idea in terms of just taking it all, but I think in sometimes, like, it's a straight-up takeover. You're under my, you know, protection now, you're my territory, and there are other times you probably have to take it a little bit more slow, like, you know, we'll just start with vassalage, you're my vassal, and then, like, through the time, kind of inch your way into taking more central power, you know? He just, like, brute forced it. I mean, granted, there was... the Ottoman conquest of Anatolia wasn't done in like a day or two, but like Bayezid definitely moved forward faster in this part of the area, like with the Karamanids and whatnot, of just taking it, and the wounds were still fresh, and obviously all these people didn't like losing power. There were still plenty of Turkish powers that you know, were resentful of the Ottomans, and as you can see here with the princes, whatnot, like, he wanted to essentially exterminate dynasties and powerful nobility, right? Just to completely assert his dominance, which again, also doesn't make one popular, so he probably was moving a bit too quick in some areas that made him more enemies that would not be useful here, you know?
Firstly, Timur's own expansion drove out the ruling elite of Iraq, Persia, and Azerbaijan, who sought refuge at Bayezid's court. Most notable of these were Sultan Ahmad Jalayir and Sultan Kara Yusuf. Offering protection to each other's political rivals paved the way for war. Perhaps most significantly, the Mamluk Sultanate, pressured by Timur, accepted his suzerainty, albeit only nominally. Still, this was enough to secure his southern flank. Timur could now turn his armies squarely against the Ottomans. The pretext for war came in the year 1400, when Bayezid sent a letter to Mutahatin, the emir of the city of Erzincan, who recently sided with Timur. Bayezid demanded obedience and tribute paid. Mutahatin refused, instead showing the letter to Timur and appealing for his help. Aware that he cannot allow his vassals to be harassed, Timur threatened Bayezid, writing, "Be content with the lands you seized from the unbelievers, but return the provinces you stole from fellow Muslims, or I will be their avenger."
So there's this subreddit that I looked at after the Kings and Generals telling. This popped up on my Google search, and it's like the translated the letters of Bayezid and Timur by a subreddit called Tiali. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I'm not gonna read it all because, as you can see, there's a lot of words being said, and they get into it. Like, some of the things, I'm like, this is the most undiplomatic talk ever. There was no diplomacy in this. They were going at each other and basically having a Twitter war. Yeah, I don't know. I find that hilarious. Like, freaking Bayezid opens up, oh, old dog. You're an infidel. Oh, man. I don't know why. That's just funny. Just two big egos that cannot back down. It's like the perfect storm, isn't it? They're both claiming to be the protectors and champions of, like, Islam. They're both protecting, what they see as their rights. They're both great upcoming conquerors who have overcome many great odds. It's just like the perfect storm for these two to meet. It's like, you couldn't write something this, like, perfect. You know what I mean? But yeah, I was afraid for Bayezid, and I was right to be afraid, because, man, this Timur, Timur is, he's a guy I would have tried avoiding fighting, but again, Bayezid just, like, he does not back down, and he, again, is his own, he's overcome great odds against crusaders and whatnot, so yeah, just two men who can't back down,
Bayezid returned an insult in kind, ordering the beards of Timur's envoys to be shaved, before returning them to their master in disgrace, with a message, "I will come find you, and if you refuse to fight me, I will chase you to India if I have to."
Holy crap. Like, that's such an ominous, like, terrifying thing to say, and, but man, again, I find Timur so frightening, like, these two, dude. It really is just, I love everything about this conflict.
Negotiations were over. In mid-August 1400, Timur advanced along the Halys River, intending to besiege Sivas, the first step in his planned invasion of Anatolia. Bayezid was preoccupied with the siege of Constantinople and could not respond to the incursion. But he prepared to muster an army and had sent envoys to the Mamluk Sultan, suggesting they join forces against the Tatar invaders. Ferek was not impressed, but kept the lines of communication open with the Ottoman court. When Timur's spies informed him of the diplomatic talks taking place between Bayezid and Ferek, he sent envoys of his own to Damascus to reaffirm his suzerainty over the Mamluks. What transpired at the meeting is unknown, but it ended with the arrest and execution of the Timurid envoys. By early September, Timur captured Sivas Castle, then proceeded to burn and destroy it, killing 4,000 Ottoman Sipahis in the process. The Muslim population was spared, but the Armenian Christians were put to the sword wholesale, many burned alive. Then,
again, brutal, man.
Instead of continuing the planned invasion of Anatolia, he turned south to reassert his authority over the Mamluks.
Which is smart, because you don't want to ever fight a war on two fronts against two different enemies, right? Like, that's never optimal. These conditions are not optimal. Those conditions are not optimal.
Dividing his army, the multiple columns crisscrossed the Taurus Mountains, leaving destruction in their wake. A not-so-subtle reminder of the fate that would befall all those who oppose him. Timurid forces devastated the cities of Elbistan and Malatya before descending into Syria. The city of Adıyaman fell soon after, and the fortress of Besni was overrun. Next was the city of Antep. By now, the Mamluks had gathered near Aleppo, under the command of Timur Tash. On the 30th of October, Timur defeated the Mamluk army and entered the city of Aleppo. The citadel surrendered by the 3rd of November.
Oh my goodness. Like, just straight up invading you, like, I don't know, just something frightening about how just quickly he's going into it, you know?
Continuing south, the Timurids were met with little resistance. The local garrisons were unable to cope with the large mobile army that swept them aside as they went. Hama, Homs, and Baalbek were pillaged. By November, Timur besieged Damascus. Throughout November and December, Sultan Ferek's forces gathered to the south in preparation to relieve the city. On the 25th of December, the Mamluk army attacked the Timurid siege lines. But once again, they were defeated and repulsed. The siege of Damascus continued until it was captured in January 1401. Subsequently, the city was sacked and set ablaze. 2 months later, in March, Timur finally departed Damascus, taking with him thousands of craftsmen, writers, and scholars, including the famous Ibn Arabsha. The punitive expedition into Syria struck fear into Sultan Ferek, thus erasing any chance of an alliance between the Mamluks and the Ottomans.
Again, Timur just went there to just assert his dominance, flex, and then walk away. Like, how much more Giga Chat can you get? Probably should have threatened the kid, been like, I've run over children your age and younger. Like, I've trampled them with my horses. Don't mess with me, child. I'm sorry, I'm still not over that. That like more than any video that like traumatized me. Oh man. There's also that time where he promised people, like, I won't shed any of your blood, so he buried them all alive. Like, I don't know why. Again, I'm sorry, I keep glazing Timur, guys. I apologize. I keep talking about him. But yeah, the man has left an impression on me. As you can tell, obviously, right?
Bayezid remained busy at Constantinople, sensing that he was on the verge of capturing the ancient capital of the Roman emperors. Although Constantinople still received supplies via the sea, the sustained pressure was enough to force Emperor Manuel to leave and spend 2 years touring the courts of Europe, begging for help. This left his nephew John as the regent in Constantinople. By the spring of 1401, the blockade had lasted for 7 years, taking a significant toll on the city. It was evident from the correspondence between John and Bayezid that the regent of Constantinople considered surrendering the city to the Ottomans, wishing to end the suffering. But Timur, by now back at his headquarters in Karabakh, was not idle. Trying to weaken Bayezid, he opened diplomatic talks with John, the regent of Constantinople, and Manuel III, the Emperor of Trebizond, offering his protection against the Ottomans in return for them providing ships for the Timurid army.
Again, like, the Romans are praying for help, and freaking the answer to their prayers is Timur, which is just amazing. You know, Timur's the hero, and like, obviously here in the Anatolian setting, like, all these people are like, oh, the Ottomans are so oppressive, like, yeah, Timur's the hero of their story, which is the funniest thing ever, just hearing that sentence, Timur is the hero, you know? I know this was many centuries ago, you know, I don't actually believe in fully judging past historical people by our modern standards. You know, like with Julius Caesar, I don't personally judge the guy. I know a lot of people do, but I'm like, you know, things were different thousands of years ago and centuries ago. Like, I can't fully judge these people by my modern 21st century American standards, I know, but you know, so I wouldn't call I guess anyone the good guy or bad guy. It's obviously a perspective thing, though Timur still does. I keep saying he scares me. Yeah, like yeah.
Both accepted, galvanized by the offer. Whether Timur was aware of how close Bayezid was to forcing the surrender of Constantinople is not known, but his promise of aid...
That is wild, that telling. Because that makes... Yeah, Timur just helped save the Roman Empire. Timur is a hero for Rome. Like, ain't that isn't that just wild? Man, the Romans lasted a few more years due to Timur's intervention, like... Yeah.
Encouraged John to stop all negotiations with the Ottoman Sultan. However, by the time he returned from Syria in the summer of 1401, it was too late in the year to continue the invasion into Anatolia. To keep his large army active and on the move, he launched his 7th expedition into Georgia to subdue the kingdom and secure his northern flank. The campaign went on for several months. This suited Timur, for he was all too aware that the troops needed to be paid and fed, and with an army numbering over 100,000 soldiers and non-combatants, this could only be achieved through continued conquest and...
Yeah, kings and generals mentioned that Timur could not linger around after he defeated Bayezid. And yeah, again, like, I've heard that he had a very mobile force, not just an army, but basically, like, he brought a lot with him, like, kind of somewhat nomadic in a sense, a nomadic traveling army and just, like, life, like, I don't know, it's, like, unique from what I heard. And, yeah, I guess in that sense, he can't just be idle ever, he's just gonna keep going and going, you know?
Plunder. Moreover,
yeah, I played this game called Mount and Blade Warband, and before I learned how to you know, get funding for my army and keep their morale high when I was first playing the game, I would assemble big armies but not be able to sustain them, so I had to keep moving, I had to keep fighting, and I had to keep looting villages and taking villagers supplies for my army, because I was like, crap, I can't sustain this, you know. Oh, I ended up losing my army. I don't know, I'm sorry, like, I just had a flashback. It was a funny event in my life. Mount and Blade Warband's the only game I play nowadays. I've like stopped playing video games for the most part. I just only play that one, you know? It's like my comfort game. I was playing it before. I've been playing it since when did I get it? 2020? 2021? Like, around there. And I've just been playing it, for years now, and only that game. Like, I never get bored of it, for some reason.
Keeping his emirs close to him on the march prevented them from returning to their homelands and stirring up revolts. Meanwhile, Bayezid, failing to persuade John to surrender the keys to Constantinople, left the siege unattended. He headed east to retake Sivas and capture Erzincan. This campaign, as well as Timur's invasion of Georgia, would be completed by late autumn of 1401. And as the year drew to a close, both leaders prepared for the inevitable battle. In early 1402, Timur marched his troops out of winter quarters towards the Ottoman border. His emirs, however, advised him against the campaign, arguing that the men were weary after spending 3 years on the march. Moreover, the emirs feared Bayezid's leadership on the battlefield and the resources readily available to him in Anatolia. Timur remained undeterred. However, he knew that Bayezid was far more formidable than any opponent he had faced before. Timur perhaps secretly viewed Bayezid as his equal. Thus, he sent word to his grandson Muhammad.
That's what I've been saying. Like, this is a meeting between equals. Bayezid has proven himself as a great commander, defeating Crusader armies, fellow Turks, Turkish, places here in Anatolia. Like, Bayezid's no chump, and Timur obviously, I don't know all of his campaigns, but I've heard a lot of impressive things, and obviously with this large empire, you gotta be pretty good yourself, I'd imagine, at fighting. Like I said, it's like a meeting between two rising superpowers. It's just like the perfect storm,
Muhammad in Samarkand, ordering him to bring fresh troops and join him in Anatolia. According to medieval accounts, over the next 2 months the Timurid army swelled up to 140,000, though between 30 and 50% of these were likely camp followers, servants and slaves. By the spring of 1402, Bayezid massed his own army of some 85,000 troops and camp followers at Basra, in preparation for a march east to meet the invaders. 2 massive columns crossed the northeastern Ottoman border. One marched along the Trebizond border. The main body, commanded by Timur, advanced through Erzurum and towards Erzincan. Splitting his forces made it possible to move faster through enemy territory. The plan was for the columns to converge on Sivas. Meanwhile, Bayezid's army slowly converged just east of Ankara. By this time, the Timurids reached Sivas, where they were met by Ottoman envoys. Timur received the Ottoman delegation, but as soon as the dialogue started, he rejected their gift, thereby confirming he did not wish to negotiate a truce. Both parties promptly insisted on their demands, glorifying the strengths of their respective armies in an effort to intimidate each other. Timur listed the many contingents from across his empire, banners from the Asian steppe, Persia, India, Georgia, and other leaders loyal to him, tens of thousands of feared horse archers, contingents of heavy cavalry in plate or mail, a large contingent of elephants from India, a terrifying shock weapon.
I love war elephants. I've said this plenty of times before, but war elephants, my favorite animal in war. They're just so cool.
Timur was confident that this impressive list would intimidate the Ottomans. But the Ottoman envoys fired back, listing all the great men loyal to Bayezid, professional infantry at the core of his army, armored feudal Sipahi cavalry. From the Balkans, the heavily armored Serbian cavalry, commanded by Stefan Lazarevic, a substantial infantry contingent led by the nobles from Bulgaria and northern Greece, mounted Kipchak Tatars recruited from Crimea, along with armored Mamluk mercenary cavalry, and thousands of Turkic horsemen and infantry levied from across Anatolia. Once the two parties blew off steam and the shouting match in the tent died down, it was clear that neither side would budge. If either Timur or Bayezid's envoys were impressed by the show of force on each side, they didn't show it. Though undoubtedly, neither had ever faced a foe of this strength.
It's true though, like, you know, like, they're both not weak though. You know what I mean? Like, they might be some of the greatest challenges each other in retrospect ever faced in each other, you know? Also, this is just funny, just they come here and they're just all yelling at each other, basically flexing, whose army is grander. I will say though, I kind of like the composition of Timur's army a bit more. It just seems more unique to me. The steppe horse archers, the, you know, war elephants, just like, I don't know, I just think Timur's army probably looked cooler, like, in terms of composition and uniqueness, not to take away from the Ottomans. I'm just saying, like, you know, in terms of just aesthetic, I guess, is all I'm saying.
Same old phone?
From Ankara, Bayezid advanced east to meet the invading menace, after receiving reports that Timur was ravaging the area around Sivas. The Sultan's advisors, however, urged that a defensive line be formed near Ankara to receive the attack, closer to their main supply lines. But it was not lost on the Ottoman Sultan that the forested hilly terrain in the Sivas region would put his majority infantry army at an advantage over the predominantly mounted Timurid force. He was eager to catch his opponent in Sivas. It was now late June, however, and the laborious march in the summer heat took its toll on the troops. About a week later, Timur suddenly moved his forces southwest after receiving reports that Bayezid was closing in, leaving a diversionary force behind to guard the rear. He too was aware that the terrain around Sivas did not favor him and wanted to avoid confronting Bayezid there. Timur marched along the banks of the Hales River, the route he used 2 years prior. His intention was to go around Bayezid and strike Kayseri. There he would stop to rest his troops and gather fodder for the horses, before continuing towards Ankara. Meanwhile, Bayezid had reached Tokat, just to the northwest of the city of Sivas. He clashed with what he thought was Timur's vanguard. Quickly brushing aside the token force, Ottoman scouts dispersed to look for signs of the enemy. Some 2 days later, they found tracks of an army moving towards the southwest. Shocked by the realization that the enemy was now behind him, the Ottoman Sultan faced about and went back the way he came.
Okay, I wanted to be silent because the Ottoman army, I think, like he mentioned earlier, was exhausted through their many campaigns, and that exhaustion was already, like, it's never good when your army's exhausted, but Bayezid pushed it even further by this march. Like, again, Bayezid, he's called a thunderbolt. His whole thing, his whole shtick is, moving faster than his enemy, catching them unawares, forced march, you know? And it's always worked well for him. This is I think, the big moment it failed, and it actually works against him that he did that. If he had remained in Ankara, he could have, like, essentially... It seemed like Timur was gonna go there anyways, so probably had a better, you know... Because the battle does end up here anyways, so all he did was force march and exhaust himself even more, only to have to go back and fight there. Again, I'm not sure if Timur would have completely won there if Bayezid had remained completely stationary, but assuming he does, then, you know, probably Bayezid could have less exhausted himself. And I understand the reasoning completely, about the whole, wanting to fight here, but again, his forced march, which has served him so well in the past, worked against him, as Timur essentially sidesteps this dude. He sidestepped him, and then was like, now let's fight here where you didn't want to fight me. Like, Timur's already, it's like such a power move. Like, this whole situation was a power move, and Timur came out on top, you know? Um, there's just something funny about that, you know? And, yeah.
Timur commanded some 90,000 fighting men. Another 50,000 camp followers tended to the carts, pack animals, and siege weapons. This heavy reliance on the baggage train allowed him to move his massive army quickly through enemy territory without the need to stop to forage. Bayezid, meanwhile, could muster 60,000 troops, which were accompanied by around 20,000 camp followers. Timur's army was clearly the larger one, but not overwhelmingly so. The Sultan from Samarkand reached Ankara with little opposition and put the city to siege. Surveying the flat plain northeast of the city, Timur was satisfied that this is where he would fight Bayezid. By the 20th of July, the thunderbolt reached the battlefield. Both commanders were aware of each other's military prowess. Bayezid was concerned about Timur's expert ability in leading his mobile nomadic cavalry and horse archers. Timur, on the other hand, worried about Bayezid's tight control of his disciplined professional infantry and astute use of heavy cavalry. Both cautious, Timur deployed with his back to hilly terrain to avoid a potential ambush. Bayezid, meanwhile, anchored his right wing on a ridge and his left wing to the Chubuk stream to protect against flanking attacks. In the center stood the Azep infantry, behind a screen of archers. Behind them were several thousand elite Janissary troops and Kapikulu Sipahi heavy cavalry, Bayezid's most trusted troops. The Sultan took command in the center, together with his sons Isa, Mustafa, and Musa, as well as his Grand Vizier, Chandarlizadeh Ali Pasha. On the right wing, Bayezid positioned the 5,000-strong Serbian contingent, commanded by his trusted vassal and brother-in-law, Prince Stefan Lazarevic. The Serbian heavy cavalry, clad in black armor, were the heaviest units on the field, famous throughout Europe for their proficiency in battle. Supporting them was the veteran Serbian infantry. Behind them were the Albanian mercenaries and volunteers. Kara Timurtaz Pasha commanded an Anatolian cavalry force alongside Lazarevic's Serbians, taking their place between them and the central front line. On the Ottoman left wing, the Sultan's son and heir Suleiman commanded the cavalry and infantry recruited from the Balkans, mainly from the recently conquered Bulgaria, along with several contingents from the Turkic beyliks of Anatolia. Behind them were the Kipchak Tatar mercenaries from Crimea. Finally, Bayezid's son Mehmet commanded the infantry reserve, which was bolstered with a force of Turkoman Kara Koyunlu cavalry. Crucial to the Sultan's plan was the subtle ridge that ran along his battle line. His plan was to use this defendable elevation to offset the numerical superiority of the enemy. On the other side of the battlefield, the Timurid vanguard was comprised of 32 Indian war elephants, which were supplied with early explosive devices, fueled by naphtha, a form of hideously damaging napalm. Combined with archers shooting from the boxes atop their backs, one can only imagine the psychological effect these gigantic monsters and the injuries they could inflict.
Yeah, also kings and generals mentioned that they had blades attached to their tusk, so that's just the most metal-looking thing ever, like... Come on, war elephants are just so cool, man. Granted, they also have a lot of drawback if you're dealing with enemies who know how to put up with them, but you know, they just look cool. They're so awesome. I love war elephants.
Had on Bayezid's western troops. Timur next placed a vast screen of horse archers across his battle line, a standard tactic of nomadic armies. A camp was set up behind each wing, tasked with resupplying these riders with arrows, fresh horses, and other provisions during the battle.
When I think about how I divide my time,
Timur's son, Miran Shah, commanded the right wing, composed of Chagatai horse archers, as well as armored cavalry from India, Georgia, and some Mamluk mercenaries. To the left of them was a mix of cavalry from Central Asia and Persia. In the center, Timur took charge of the elite armored cavalry, along with mounted units from Samarkand and contingents of the Surbedari infantry. On the left wing, Timur's son Shah Rukh commanded a large contingent of Chagatai cavalry, joined by Anatolian Beys. Supporting them on their right were a mix of Armenian and Turkoman cavalry and footmen, as well as other units recruited from across the Middle East. Finally, Timur's grandson and heir, Muhammad Mirza, was placed in charge of the reserve cavalry force. The battle began about 10 a.m. with the general advance of Timur's army. The horse archers rode ahead, while the rest of the army lagged behind, allowing time for the mounted archers to soften the Ottoman line or bait them into charging into the open. The initial plan was to put pressure on Suleiman, where the ground was flatter and the Ottoman position more vulnerable to envelopment. Timur's nomadic riders on the right were the first to unleash a storm of arrows. Unnerved and taking losses, the Balkan troops nevertheless withstood the volleys. Shortly after, Shah Rukh's archers concentrated their volleys on Lazarevich's contingent. Most of the arrow fire was focused on the Serbian prince's banner, but the projectiles were ineffective against the heavily armored troops. In the center, confronted with waves of volleys unleashed by the Chagatai riders, the Ottoman foot archers withdrew onto the high ground behind the infantry and continued to respond with volleys of their own. Like thousands of hornets, Timurid archers swarmed in front of the static Ottoman line, looking for a weak spot.
Horse archers are so cool. The amount of skill just to ride and be able to, like, no scope your shoot an arrow. I play as a horse archer on Mount and Blade Warband. Let me bring up that game. I brought up that game since the beginning of this channel, like back in the Dovahadi days, like. Yeah, because it's OP. Horse archery is really OP. At least in that game, and even in real life, it's really cool. Yeah, there's this thing really cool about it, you know, and
rushed in, firing off their bows at nearly point-blank range, before circling back, only to be replaced by a new wave of swift-moving archers.
It's true, it's like, it's almost a psychological effect of, like, this seemingly is never-ending. Remember when, like, the Parthians defeated the invasion from the Romans under the first triumvirate member? There was Pompey, there was Caesar, Cassie? It starts with a C, wait. Crassus. It was Crassus. I completely forgot his name, but, like, you know, essentially what the Parthians did, they just kept shooting the Romans, and then, like, when they would run out of, like, ammo, they would just grab new one by nearby camels that were just ferrying more arrows. And Timur has essentially set up these camps to keep supplying them with horses, and that's just smart. New, fresh horses, fresh ammunition to keep shooting. Like, again, like that's just so smart. Like a seemingly never-ending horde of just keep shooting you, right? Yeah.
After a while, commotion began in the Ottoman Azep ranks. For the Timurid archers, this was like sharks smelling blood. From experience, they knew that this part of the enemy line was feeling the pressure of the constant barrage. On cue, all Timurid riders focused their arrows on the wavering Azep infantry.
That's so terrifying. They just re-spot that quickly and we're like, alright, let's do it. Man. Yeah, and fighting horse archers is also super annoying, just due to their speed and maneuverability. Like I said, I play as them in Mount and Blade Warband, but like fighting them is annoying, cause like they're just moving around, it's like I have to chase and catch them, and like, especially like, you know, sometimes they're just too quick for me, like, especially when there's just so many, like, granted, I know I keep bringing up a video game and this is real life, I know, but like, I don't know, I just kind of keep getting reminded, and I'm assuming if that's true in the game, real life, it's probably even worse, right? Fighting them.
To either force them to flee or bait them into charging forward. But Bayezid commanded the men to hold the line, despite the casualties, demonstrating his strong leadership.
Discipline!
He knew that by now, the nomadic riders were low on arrows, and that the first wave was nearly over. Indeed, not long after, Timur's horse archers retreated, their quivers empty. They rode back towards the camps in the rear to replenish their ammo and get fresh horses, passing through the incoming wave of Timurid cavalry that switched from a trot to full gallop towards the enemy line. Ottoman archers loosed their arrows when the central Timurid formation came into range. Moments later, Timur's cavalry crashed into the Ottoman left. In the center, the momentum of the charge pushed back the Azep infantry, inflicting severe casualties. Bayezid ordered the archers to focus all of their support on the Azep sector by lobbing arrows into the enemy line. The Sultan sent in the Janissaries to stabilize the center. Due to the ferocity of the Timurid charge, he had no choice but to commit his best infantry earlier than planned. Meanwhile, on the right, the Anatolians under Timurtas held their formation, but the more experienced Persian infantry drove them back. The Serbian heavy cavalry, meanwhile, countercharged the elite contingent of Middle Eastern and Anatolian formations. Serbian swords and lances tore through their formation.
Heck yeah, these knights, European knights, are just something. Even when they're on the back foot, they can still do so much damage to you. Like, you know, and like they probably did one of the best performances in this battle, the Serbian knights. Like, probably one of the best performances on the Ottoman side, if not the best, you know?
Penetrating armor and dismounting riders. In the center, while the Azeps continued to struggle for cohesion, the disciplined Janissaries held strong, inflicting heavy losses on the Timurids. Fearing that his center could break, Timur responded by reinforcing the attack. Back on the right, by now the Serbian heavy cavalry pushed down the gentle hill, driving the enemy back across the plain. Unsupported, they risked being dangerously separated from the rest of the Ottoman line. Bayezid recognized the advance on the right and sent an urgent message to Stefan to restrain his men from advancing any further and pull back.
That was such a great call from Bayezid. We've seen so many of these battles in these videos where one side pushes too far and then they get hit from the back. Like, thank goodness he noticed that and like helped mitigate that potential disaster. They pushed way too far, you know? So again, great call from Bayezid. I keep saying Bayezid, I don't know. Depending on who I'm watching, the way I pronounce things changes. I just end up following whatever the person in the video pronounces it as.
In the center, the unrelenting Janissaries had worn down the Timurids and forced them back. Timur and his captains made sure to control the fighting withdrawal so it didn't turn into a rout. The Janissaries eventually broke off and did not pursue, using the time to rest, regroup, and replace broken weapons and shields. Timur, meanwhile, seeing that his attacks on the left and center were repulsed, ordered the men back, as a new wave of archers was on its way.
the way I saw my job.
Bayezid likely ordered the men to reform, steeling them for the next phase of the battle. Not wanting to give any respite to the enemy, Timur pulled back the line to make room for the renewed attack by his mounted archers. Now, with fresh horses and replenished quivers, the agile riders weaved their way through the retreating cavalry to begin another round of missile.
Seeing this is so cool. Like, imagine seeing this in real life must have been even cooler. Like, almost this, like, gauntlet that Timur has set up with his army. You know what I mean? Like, the first phase of the battle, horse archers, and then they move back as the rest of the army moves forward to give the fight, and then the army pulls back only for a new wave of horse. It's like a freaking, like, cycle, like, you know what I mean? I don't know how else to describe it, but it's such a unique but effective system, at least in terms of just keeping your the aggression up at all times, giving your enemy not too much space to breathe, you know? I don't know, I think that's just really cool, personally.
Attacks on the Ottomans. Their main target in the center was, again, the Azep infantry, who were yet to fully regain their composure after the first wave. But this time, Ottoman archers, being on foot and on elevated ground, were able to fire more accurately than their mounted counterparts, their deadly volleys felling many Timurid riders. On the other side of the battlefield, Timur assigned 2 units from the rear to reinforce the vanguard in preparation for the next assault. In addition, he ordered his son Miran Shah to shift some of the Persian cavalry to the left wing, realizing that more force will be needed against the Serbian contingent in the next wave.
I had heard that Timur actually complimented the Serbians, or at least admired their prowess in battle. And you can see why the medieval knight was so powerful and renowned, right? Like, yeah.
Meanwhile, the swarm of activity continued in front of the Ottoman line, as the steppe riders continued to chip away at Bayezid's men. While losses mounted, the Ottoman discipline held, the men valiantly withstanding the barrage of arrows. Having reshuffled his lines, Timur launched the second attack. His horse archers once again gradually swerved around and began withdrawing to the rear to mount fresh.
Such a cool and unique system, man. Like, in practice, this would have been awesome to just witness, I think.
Horses and restock on arrows. Bayezid could see the stronger concentration of troops in the Timurid center. Worried about the endurance of the Azep infantry, he moved all of his archers behind them to provide additional close-range support. Additional Janissary units were sent forward to strengthen the center. From the Ottoman rear, Mehmet sent reinforcements to the Ottoman right wing, anticipating that this time the Serbian contingent will be struck with much greater force. In addition, Bayezid tasked the Albanian mercenary cavalry to aid Stefan in the ridge sector. Timur, wanting to further increase pressure, ordered Shah Rukh to fully commit the left wing and move 2 reserve units to bolster his numbers. Fully committing Shah Rukh at the last moment was a brilliant move, as it gave Bayezid little time to react. Timur was
catching the enemy off guard.
1 step ahead.
1 step ahead. Timur. Man, like I'm saying, this is great. You know, this kind of reminds me of, There's some similarities with, like, the Battle of Hastings, you know, kind of like where Harold Godwinson mainly had to just kind of hold, the line while, you know, William the Conqueror kept, like, trying to break it. I don't know. Granted, there is differences, I'm just saying, like, I'm getting some similarity in that, you know.
Meanwhile, the Ottomans received the attack on their right. In the chaos, the lines mixed. The overwhelming numbers Timur committed against the Serbian contingent were expected to pin down the heavily armored knights, while the cavalry on the right wing broke through to roll up the Ottoman line. Timur's fresh units on the far left managed to gain ground and fight their way across the ridge. But opposing them, Stefan and his veterans were unyielding, despite being outnumbered almost 2-1. After about 30 minutes of fighting, the Ottoman right had stopped the enemy once again. It was now around noon. 2 hours had passed since the fighting began. In the center, the reinforced Timurid vanguard pinned down the Ottomans, the weight of the attack mostly focused on the Azep infantry. However, this time supported by the Janissaries and concentrated volleys of the foot archers, the Azep line held. But on the Ottoman left wing, the situation looked grim. The Anatolian infantry and cavalry under Suleiman buckled against Miran Shah's men. Bayezid reacted quickly, sending forward the Tatar mercenaries. But instead of aiding the Anatolians, the Tatars switched sides and joined Timur's troops in decimating the Ottoman left.
Again, like, Kings and Generals said that apparently Timur might have made, like, a deal with these guys to defect to him or something, might have had some type of communication, either way, or maybe they just saw that, like, you know, well, maybe Timur, let's throw our lots with this guy, yeah.
The reason for their defection remains unclear. As mercenaries, perhaps they thought that joining Timur would be more rewarding. Another possibility is they decided to join their nomadic brethren. Caught between the Tatars and the Timurids in a merciless crossfire, many Ottoman troops under Suleiman's command fled, trying to get away from the slaughter. Bayezid urgently sent the armored Sipahi cavalry under his son Mehmed to prevent his left wing from disintegrating. Struck from behind, the lightly armored Kipchaks were no match against the Sipahis. Unable to wiggle away, they were cut to pieces in close quarters. Nevertheless, the Anatolians were still hard pressed. Observing the situation and the implosion of the Ottoman left wing, Timur sent forward additional units to press the advantage. However, by around 1 p.m., it seemed that Bayezid succeeded in stabilizing this sector with Mehmed's reserves, despite the increasing pressure. But then, a calamity for the Ottomans. Among Timur's reinforcements, banners of Karaman, Aydin and Menteşe flapped in the wind. These were the Turkic lords, previously defeated by Bayezid during his expansion in
I'm telling you, this would have been just the most wild thing to have witnessed in real life. Like, it came back to bite him, right? These lords, it came back to bite Bayezid, man.
Anatolia, some of whom fled to join Timur. The Anatolians serving the Ottomans could see the standards of their former brethren within Timurid ranks, and some of these who had been fighting under the command of Kara Timurtis Pasha on the center right also switched sides. Worse, by now, the nomadic horse archers had returned, lobbing arrows at the Ottomans as they rode past. Bayezid and Mehmet both urgently sent more troops to shore up their wings.
Using all the reserves that they can.
By now, Suleiman had lost control of the Ottoman left. With his personal retinue, he fought his way out and began retreating from the field. Seeing his son's banner abandoning the front line, Bayezid sent word to the Serbian Prince Stefan on the opposite wing, requesting his presence on the left to shore up the ranks and instill discipline. Timur's elite Mamluks rushed into the gap left in the Serbian line by the departing Stefan. But the breakthrough was stopped by the veteran Serbian infantry. However, parts of the Ottoman right began to waver after enduring hours of fighting, defections, and a constant barrage of arrows. Crossing the battlefield to join the fighting on the left, Stefan sent a messenger to the Sultan, urging him to conduct a fighting retreat, or at least leave the command in the hands of his sons and withdraw to safety. But in Bayezid's mind, fleeing was unacceptable. He was not just some mediocre emir. He was the Ottoman Sultan who had doubled the territory of the empire in...
Again, that pride, you know. He can't back down, but he also can't flee. Little did he know what a big mistake this was, because he probably should have gotten out instead of being Timur's prisoner. Oh gosh.
Inherited from his forefathers, undefeated in battle. Glancing once more to his left, Bayezid could see that the wing there had stabilized. Taking a deep breath and steeling himself, the Ottoman Sultan jerked his steed and led the remaining Sipahis forward. Joining the Janissaries in the center, Bayezid's presence lifted the spirits of the men. Despite the punishment they've endured for much of the afternoon, the elite Janissary infantry frenziedly hacked their way forward, driving back the Timurid center. Meanwhile, on the Ottoman left, Prince Stefan joined the fighting with a handful of lieutenants that were still alive, galvanizing the troops. Exchanging blow after blow, it was the Timurid troops who succumbed to the pressure.
This is such a cool back and forth that these guys have been in. Like, it really is just a clash of titans, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how else to describe this conflict. Like, this is a battle that deserves the label of epic.
Seeing that the battle was turning against him, Timur sent in the last of his reserves. Some were to join Miran Shah to help finish off the Ottoman left wing. The rest were tasked with joining the attack against the Ottoman right and attempt once more to break the resolve of the Serbian contingent now that their leader, Prince Stefan, was absent. Timur also sent in many of the horse archers who had run out of arrows to join the desperate struggle. Finally, Timur unleashed his 32 elephants.
Finally, the war elephant has come. It kind of goes to show you just the desperation on both sides, right? Like, they basically used up most of their reserves, if not all, to just get the advantage in this tug of war. Again, like, this was a hard-fought battle on both sides, you know?
Even through the din of battle, the rumbling of the ground could be felt as the Indian riders spurred on the massive animals. In one of the last orders of the day, the Sultan from Samarkand ordered the units in the center to clear a path for the Indian riders. Towering over 3 meters and weighing more than 4 tons, the shadows of the 32 massive beasts would be the last sight of many in their path.
I don't know how you, like, stay resolved when you see elephants charging at you. Especially the breed in India. I know that in war elephants, like, there was the Asia Indian breed, and then there was the more African breed, and I've often heard that the Indian war elephants were bigger and, like, more stronger. So it's like these, if that rings true, then these are, like, some of the biggest beasts that these guys could ever see, and they're just running towards them. Like, imagine getting trampled by an elephant. Like, that's an awful way to go.
With iron determination, the Janissaries refused to yield as the giant beasts ripped right through them. Gaping holes were left in the Ottomans.
Beyond brave. I would have already been like 5 miles running. I mean, like, I see an elephant running at me, I'm like, nope.
Central formations, as scores of men were trampled by the rampaging elephants. Most of the frightened animals finally collapsed in the midst of the Ottoman soldiers, succumbing to the injuries they sustained from hundreds of sword blows. A few of the elephants that survived, punching through the Ottoman line, proceeded to flee the field. Though the carnage by Timur's elephants had stopped, the damage inflicted was irreparable.
I know, basically almost broke the center right here to now where Timur can just go in, like, insane.
Worse, the Ottoman army was by now fully committed. With no reinforcements left to bolster the left wing and fill the shattered units in the center, they were overwhelmed across the entire battle line. Timur knew that now was the time. He ordered a general advance. Every man still able to hold a weapon was brought forward. The Ottoman line was firmly on the back foot. Within the hour, large sections of the Ottoman line broke and fled. Most of the men on the left wing routed. Exhausted, some men simply gave up and collapsed to the ground. Others found the strength to flee the carnage. Others still remained in the fight. Prince Stefan again urged the Sultan to retreat, but Bayezid refused. This time his resolve to stay and fight was perhaps to allow his sons to escape to safety. Prince Stefan formed an escort and fought his way out. The Sultan's sons, Mehmet, Suleiman and Isa, managed to retreat, but Musa and Mustafa were captured during the fighting. As the Ottoman army was reduced, contingents still offering resistance were cornered and surrounded. In a dramatic last stand, Bayezid stood valiantly on the hill of Katal Tepe with his Janissaries, who fought and died next to their Sultan. They repelled waves of attacks until late in the afternoon, before finally being ground down. Late in the day, a breakout was attempted. Bayezid and his select retinue tried fighting their way eastward, but to no avail. Timur had won the day. His army suffered around 15,000 dead and wounded. In stark contrast, some 30,000 Ottoman troops lay dead on the field, half of the army that fought in the Battle of Ankara. The terrifying death toll was evident across the dusty plain of Chubuk. The most disastrous, however, was the capture of the Ottoman Sultan Bayezid.
Yo, I would rather just die than be Timur's captive. I would just be like, kill me, please. You know, there are legends about, like, Bayezid's time as a hostage of, like, Timur. I mean, some of them take with a grain of salt, or like legends and whatnot, but some are like, I've heard, are like, you know, like he was essentially put in a cage under Timur's like table where he feasted, and like Bayezid's like wife like had to like serve the food but like topless or something. I don't know how true some of those things I've heard, but like if any of them are true, then Timur essentially tortured this dude psychologically. He's like, let me tell you some stories about how many children I trampled. And Bayezid's like, no, stop, please. Just stop telling me this. Kill me. That's what I would be doing. Like, please, just kill me. I would rather die than be Timur's captive. But, all joking aside, that was a great battle. Honestly, one of the best battles I've heard. Might be one of my favorites. I'm definitely gonna be referencing that in future videos, kind of like I did with Hastings and whatnot. Like, this was great. And both tellings are goated, from Kings and Generals and HistoryMarche. Like, goated. Just too goated.
With the crushing victory at Ankara and the capture of the Ottoman Sultan, Timur was now the undisputed master of Anatolia. Pushing west, he conquered one of the last Crusader enclaves in Asia the Knights of St. John's Fortress at Smyrna. Timur restored the Turkic Emirates, most notably Karaman, incorporating them into his sphere.
Man, you know, Timur dying 2 years after this is the best thing that could have happened to the Ottomans, because they had time to rebound. And again, just beyond devastating. In addition to, like, torturing Bayezid, he essentially undid his work and, like, made him live to see it, right? Look at all that you accomplished and let me take it away from you. Like, the psychological damage. Like, there are some myths, or maybe not myths, but there are some speculation that Bayezid killed himself in terms of, like, poison or something. That's one of the suggested, theorized ways he did, and if that is true, then you could see why he was probably under a lot of mental distress, and Timur was just, like, torturing the poor man. Like, kill me. And Timur's like, no, you're gonna live. I love this guy. This guy's a menace. I love
of influence. In a show of dominance, he sent a message to Bayezid's son and heir, Suleiman Çelebi, granting him the Balkan provinces.
I'm telling you, this man is a menace. He's asserting his dominance. He also, in Kings and Generals telling, he sent a letter to, like, Europe. I think, like, to the Europeans, like, look at what I did and you couldn't. Like, he just proceeded to flex on everybody. Here, I'll let you keep the Balkans. Hey, Europe, look at what I did and you couldn't. Like, the man's a menace in every sense of the word. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to watch the Mongol series. I need to learn more about Timur.
But Timur could not linger in Anatolia for long. He had to keep his army on the move, and he soon marched back the way he came. By now an old man in his 60s, Timur breathed his final breath in 1405, during a campaign directed at China. The empire he built did not survive for long. Ironically, the Ottoman Empire he dismantled at Ankara did survive. After a period of civil wars, capable new sultans emerged. Within a few decades, the Ottoman Empire would re-emerge as the pre-eminent power in Europe and the Middle East. Don't forget to visit Growth School, the first...
That was amazing. I loved this. This was just... chef's kiss.